From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ollie. Has Stevie Wonder taken a job at Madame Tussauds, I wonder? Have you seen the wretched state of the waxworks at Madame Tussauds of late? They unveiled one today for Helen Mirren. Honest to Jesus, maybe Stevie Wonder would have done a better job. How you doing, by the way? It's Wednesday. It is July 17th, 2019. My name is Richie Allen. Welcome to your Richie Allen Show.
Richie Allen.
Yeah.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
I've only got one guest for you today. Deborah Tavares returns to the Richie Allen Show. On the website stopthecrime.net, Deborah regularly publishes documents and briefings that show that there is a global agenda to transform society on every level, every which way but loose, and that it happens through technological disruption and weather warfare, amongst other things. So to comment on the recent earthquakes in California and much more besides, Deborah Tavares is the guest today. You can tweet the program. If there's something you'd like me to put to Deborah, do so through Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show. I'm live on Fab Radio 2, triggerwarning.tv, my own website, richieallen.co.uk, and multiple other platforms. Tune in radio as well. Welcome. Good to be with you. It's a bit cooler today. A little bit cooler in Salford, in Greater Manchester. Busy old day, but a good day. You well? Is all well in your world? It is. It's not. You'd complain, but nobody would listen. Right, let's jump into a couple of important stories. It has been announced today that the younger brother of the alleged Manchester Arena bomber Salman Abedi is being extradited from Libya to the UK. Has been, in fact, extradited, because I believe that Greater Manchester police officers did indeed arrest the man in London today. His name is Hashim Abedi. He was arrested in Libya a day after the May 2017 suicide attack that killed 22 people at Manchester Arena. So he was arrested a day after the suicide attack. But it's taken this long to extradite the man. This is very problematic. Now, the Interior Minister's office in Tripoli did confirm that Abedi was on a flight which left Mitiga Airport, or Mitiga, however you pronounce it, at 10:30 UK time this morning. The Home Office has thus far not said very much. Sources have told the BBC it was a government-owned jet that transported Hashim Abedi to London. Here is Greater Manchester Police's Chief Constable Ian Hopkins in a very brief comment earlier.
Crown Prosecution Service successfully applied for the extradition of Hashim Abedi from Libya, and that today he has been extradited for offences relating to the Manchester Arena attack. He was handed over by Libyan authorities to British police officers this morning. They escorted him on the flight back, and they landed in the United Kingdom a short while ago. Greater Manchester police officers have arrested Hashim Abedi for murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to cause an explosion likely to endanger life.
Yeah. So they kidnapped the guy then, basically. Extradited him using a government plane, all very dodgy. Based on what evidence is there that Hashim al-Abedi provided material support for his brother Salman al-Abedi? You might remember when this happened, I walked around the area of Fallowfield where these men lived for a time, and nobody knew very much about Salman Abedi, including some of the Libyan folks I met there. Let's just park that for a minute. So Ramadan al-Abedi then. Richie, hang on now. Salman al-Abedi is the alleged suicide bomber. Hashim al-Abedi is the brother who's been extradited. Who's Ramadan al-Abedi? Well, Ramadan al-Abedi is the brother's father. And he was once of the Libyan Islamic fighting group, and MI6 and the British government loved them, the deep state. And MI6 loved Ramadan al-Abedi. They called him Agent Tunworth, and they gave him loads of money to plan and carry out an assassination attempt on Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, right? Right. You know this because David Shaler, legend. Whatever about some of the problems David has had over the years, I like David, and he's been on this programme fairly recently and will come on the programme again. David Shaler exposed this. He exposed after the Manchester Arena bombing who Ramadan al-Abedi is, and his son, and the link between the two and MI6. David Shaler came on this programme, gave me the exclusive. And a couple of days later, it was in The Guardian. Yeah. But not much, though, in The Guardian. So the UK, that's the UK government, took in Ramadan al-Abedi, the father, after they failed to kill Muammar Gaddafi. They gave him political asylum in Britain in 1992. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, huh? Wow. I say this again because long-time listeners will know this. Listeners who are not long-time, well, they probably won't know it. This is a marvellous quagmire of craziness, this, isn't it? And strangely, when Hashim al-Abedi was arrested just after the Manchester Arena bombing, they also arrested Ramadan al-Abedi, the father, in Libya. And guess what? They held on to Hashim, but they released Ramadan al-Abedi, rather mysteriously. Are you following this, yeah? So Salman Abedi then, who has been identified as the man who blew himself up at the arena, he studied business at Salford University. He was a frequent traveller to Libya after his father moved back there in 2011. He was described by a former teacher as a very slow, an uneducated and a very passive person. This stinks to high heaven. You know it does. I know it does. But nobody in the mainstream media has the courage to ask questions about this. So we've just kidnapped this guy out of Libya, brought him back here, levelled these charges at him. And of course, the trial, of course, won't be with a public gallery. It won't be a public trial. You know this, don't you? You know, if he ever does go to trial, Hashim Abedi. Yeah. It's 10 minutes past the hour. It's 10 minutes past the hour, huh? Huh?
What kind of fuckery is this?
Yeah, it deserved it. It deserved it. It deserved it. And Joe Public, and I don't mean Joe Public who listens to the programme, but the UK's Joe Public, oblivious to any of this. They don't know, because they don't listen to this programme. If they did, they'd know. Well, Elon Musk set up a company called Neuralink, didn't he? And we know this, we talked about it in the past. And they wanted to explore ways to connect the human brain to a computer interface by putting a microchip in the brain. And they've now applied to regulators in the United States, that's the FDA, to start trialling the device on humans. And they want to do this within the next year because it's available. This device to connect the human brain to a computer. Yeah. Here's Elon Musk talking about this. Oh, they sold this guy as a friend of the people, didn't they? Here's Elon Musk talking about this at a presentation yesterday.
The main reason for doing this presentation is recruiting.
First of all, we want to recruit. We want a bunch of suckers to agree next year to have microchips put in their brains. And we know that people under 25 will queue up to have brain surgery and have microchips planted in their prefrontal lobes. Absolute fucking morons will queue up. So number one, says Elon, we want to do this presentation, because we want to recruit. Yeah. What else did he say?
And this will be a slow process where we will gradually increase the issues that we solve until ultimately we can do a full brain-machine interface.
So ultimately, we want to do a full brain-machine interface. But in the meantime, there'll be a slow process where we use human guinea pigs who just sign a non-disclosure agreement or sign a we will not sue document, okay, after you fuck our brains up. This is mad stuff, right? But ultimately, after all of that, we'll have full human brain interface. This is great, huh?
Yeah, this is going to sound pretty weird, but...
Are you shitting me, Elon? It's going to sound pretty weird.
Achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence.
Achieve a symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So what could possibly go wrong?
But I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface,
Hive mind with brain-machine interface. Hive mind.
I think we can actually go along for the ride.
We can go along for the ride.
And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. And this is extremely important.
Have the option. Extremely important that you have the option. It's not forced on you. You can have the option. Mad stuff, huh? Mad stuff. What else did he say? Oh yeah, it'll be wireless, of course.
And then the interface to the chip is wireless. So you have no wires poking out of your head. Very, very important. So it's basically Bluetooth to your phone. Because we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that one. Make sure we don't have a driver issue. And we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. So this is not far.
It's not far away. It's not far away. Elon Musk. Elon Musk.
What kind of fuckery are you?
Yeah. Hive mind. And of course, a hive mind means total control of what you think. Even better, the ability to watch your thoughts in real time. And if they become a bit dangerous, a bit threatening, if you stray from the herd, you begin to think individually, well, we can intervene. We can activate the chip in your brain. But also we can now program you directly, not indirectly as we do now, because now we use television, we use music, we use books, we use magazines. Yes, we use devices using non-ionizing radiation. We do all that to program you, but it's not perfect. But once you put a chip in your brain, well, it's game over. Game over. And they'll queue up. They will queue up. The same vacuous, empty-headed fucking retards who spend 3 to 4 days outside in the pissing rain to be the first group of moronic, empty-headed mushrooms to own the latest iPhone. They'll go along with it and say, please operate on me and put a microchip in my brain. Yeah. More than 60 Labour peers took out an advertisement today in The Guardian accusing Jeremy Corbyn of having failed the test of leadership over his handling of anti-Semitism complaints within the party. These peers included more than a dozen former ministers, people like Beverly Hughes, John Reid and Peter Hain, and also people like Peter Mandelson, the devil incarnate himself. So they wrote this scathing letter by way of an advertisement in The Guardian and said, this is your legacy, Jeremy. The party is not safe for Jews. It welcomes everyone, irrespective of race, creed, age, gender, identity or sexual orientation, except, it seems, the Jews. Ah, be Jesus. Here's Theresa May speaking to Jeremy Corbyn today, addressing him directly about this at Prime Minister's questions, and you will hear the Leader of the Opposition's reply, of course. But first of all, Terry May.
60 distinguished members of the Labour Party have written in the newspapers, the Labour Party welcomes everyone except, it seems, Jews. This is your legacy, Mr. Corbyn. You still haven't opened your eyes. You still haven't told the whole truth. You still haven't accepted your responsibility. You have failed the test of leadership. Apologise now.
Ah, shut up, Theresa, you batty old cow. Yesterday's news. Nonsense. The cheek of her. What did Jezza say? Did he finally take this on, Corbyn, and call out who and what is behind it? Did he fuck like? Have a listen.
Anti-Semitism has no place in our society, no place in any of our parties, and no place in any of our dialogue. Neither does any other form of racism. And when 60% of Tory party members think Islam is a threat to Western civilization, the Prime Minister has said she will act on Islamophobia within her own party. I hope she does. I look forward to seeing that being dealt with, as we will deal with any racism that occurs within our own party as well.
Yeah. Listen carefully now. And I'm addressing the Zionists in the Northwest who never missed an episode of the Richie Allen Show. And I know this to be true because I've got friends who are, well, they're damn near geniuses when it comes to checking the IP addresses of nasty emails that are sent to me. We know who you are and we know where you are. Thanks for listening in, by the way. There's no evidence, not a shred of it, that there has been any increase in this country of antipathy towards those who identify as Jews. None. Given a chance on social media, they talk about Ken Livingstone and they talk about Chris Williamson and they talk about Naz Shah, none of whom showed any antipathy or hatred for Jews in the comments they made about the Havre agreement, which Livingstone brought up, of course. Williamson said we shouldn't be bowing down to these accusations. That's not anti-Semitic either. And Naz Shah said, why doesn't the United States basically adopt Israel? Not anti-Semitic either. Zero evidence. Just a few fishwives saying that it is so. It's a very dangerous time. It's unsafe for Jews in the Labour Party. But no evidence. Not a shred of it. Not a modicum of it. Nothing. But you see where I come from? Evidence still matters. It matters more than anything in this bleak, post-apocalyptic, post-fact world. We haven't had the apocalypse. I know we haven't had the apocalypse. Post-fact. It matters, evidence. It matters. There's none. When somebody says, for example, David Baddiel, the comedian and writer, who has gone very quiet, or at least his producers have gone very quiet around getting me onto some program that he's making about anti-Semitism. Baddiel has been tweeting that people should just believe Jews when they say that they have been abused. Baddiel said we should believe the Jews just like we believe others who claim they have been abused, insulted, taunted, or had to suffer bigotry. Well, no. You see, when the actress Tracy Ann Oberman, formerly of EastEnders, went on the Victoria Derbyshire show the other day and said that all these horrible things have been said to her, dreadful things, I never said I didn't believe her, but I also said that I couldn't believe her without some sort of evidence. The burden of proof is surely on the accuser. Every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Got to prove it. You can't just go on the BBC, on Panorama or Victoria Derbyshire and say, somebody called me an effing Jew. Did they? Did you call the police? Did you report the person? Who is the person? Tell me privately. No evidence. None. How does this particular identity group, Jews, as Catholics are an identity group, I've said this for years, an identity group, a culture, not a race, not an ethnic group standing alone. How does this particular identity group, which has thrived in the UK, thrived? We know it's true that Jews have thrived, overrepresented in media, politics and industry compared to their representation in society. Overrepresented. Good for them. You think they'd shut up about it, wouldn't you? Lest people start to take a hard look at them. And by them we mean Zionists. Anti-Semitism is a myth. It's a myth. It's a nonsense. Doesn't go on. You could count on one hand in any neighbourhood or in any city how many people sit around thinking that the Jews are some hunched over, wizened, evil little group of trolls that want to rule, dominate, control the world. They don't exist, these people. What you have is a population increasingly sickened by the control of the Zionist lobby exerted in London, in Paris, in DC, while they brutalise, murder, kidnap, torture and fucking rape the indigenous people of Palestine. And as people are sickened by it, they get more outspoken. And as they get more outspoken, well, we better put a stop to that. And as for the whole Jews are not a race thing, don't believe me. Look up Rabbi Danny Rich. Look up Rabbi Julia Neuberger. Look up the philosopher Karl Sartre. I always pronounce his name wrong. Look up him. Jews are not national nor international. They're not religious nor are they ethnic. It's a quasi-historical community, he said. He's right. Jonathan Friedland, the broadcaster, the writer, said the same thing. We're neither a race nor a religion. We're something like a civilization. We're an identity. He didn't say we're an identity group, but that's what we are. How does this particular identity group, which has thrived in this country, how? Why? Corbyn bows to it, collapses in the face of it. How shocking it is that nobody will speak truth to Zionist power in this country. Watch Peter O'Byrne's documentary in the late 2000s on Channel 4. Read the books of Shlomo Zand. Read Norman Finkelstein. Read the article in the Times of Israel by Manny Friedman. Listen to Jonathan Friedland. It's an outrage. Jews are the safest people in this country. They are the most unmolested group of people in this country. And as a group, they are thriving. Thank you very much. Fact. Not fiction. Not pretension. Not bigotry. Not anti-Semitism. Nothing. It's a fact. Nobody will stand up to them. Nobody. Researchers, dear listener, researchers who have talked about Zionism collapse in the face of Zionist aggression. Some researchers who've been on this programme, whose talks have been closed down and shut down by Zionists, have run away from it, have privately promised to take them on through court cases, have privately promised that they would take them on by challenging groups like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism and its charity status, but have done nothing. The only people who've stood up to it are Gilad Atzmon and your presenter. And Alison Shablow, although I'm loath to mention Alison, because although I have sympathy for Alison and her right to free speech, I don't agree with some of the things that she said, as I've said many times on the programme. But Gilad has stood up to it. I've stood up to it. But where are the heroes of the independent media, some of them with a lot of money in the bank? Where are they? They talk a lot on social media about it's terrible that we're being shut down. Well, do something about it then. Go after these people financially. I can't do it. I'd love to. Some of these people were getting my talks cancelled, and if they were interfering with my right to earn money, I'd go after them. Right? Yeah. It's wonderful in the independent media, watching some of the old-time independent media heroes with lots and lots of money complaining about it and then doing nothing about it. Yeah, that's right. Time that somebody did something about it. If I had the money, I'd do something about it. That being said, they haven't interfered with my ability to earn a living, not yet anyway. But if they do, and if one of them is stupid enough to go public and make false allegations about me, I'll sue them. I'll find the money to sue them. Interesting, isn't it? These are interesting times. Corbyn does nothing. McDonnell does nothing. McDonnell has gone worse, the shadow chancellor, because he's starting to bow to it and say, yeah, well, maybe we need to have more meetings with our Jewish colleagues and listen to their concerns and let them tell us how to proceed. No, that's the logic that allows Zionists frame how we discuss Israel and Palestine. You know, we hear Zionists all the time say, look, here's an example of how you can criticise Israel without being anti-Semitic. No Zionist is going to tell me how I can criticise Israel, or lay the framework or the ground rules as to how I can go about it. No, not in a million years. I'll talk about Israel in any way that I feel like talking about Israel. I don't I don't take any instruction from a Zionist or from a Jewish lobbyist in this country on how I can and can't talk about Israel, on how I can and can't talk about the Holocaust. No thanks. I'll decide those terms for myself. This is Wednesday's Richie Allen Show. Yeah, wanted to get that off my chest for a bit, that. You know, the heroes of the truther industrial complex, some of them very, very wealthy, who bitched and complained about being closed down by the Zionist lobby, but then did nothing about it. Nothing. Makes you think. It certainly makes you think. Right. We're going to take some music, I think, and then we're off to California. Yeah. To talk to Deborah Tavares. Be in my bonnet about that all day long. Okay, here we go. Manchester's finest, the Smiths on the Richie Allen Show. This is Big Mouth Strikes Again. Music from the Smiths on the Richie Allen Show. It's 28 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Welcome back to the programme. Good to be with you. Let me read this briefly before we welcome Deborah back to the programme. This is in USA Today. Today, yes, that's right. Is the big one next? California was shaking again on Tuesday with 6 earthquakes of 3.5 or greater. This is Kristen Lamb writing in USA Today this Wednesday. A magnitude 4.3 earthquake shook the eastern San Francisco Bay Area at 1:11 p.m. Tuesday. A few minutes later, a magnitude 4.5 hit near Ridgecrest, which earlier this month was rattled by a pair of massive tremors, including the most powerful shaker, which was 7.1. That was the most powerful to strike California in 20 years. Does this mean the big one is coming? Don't panic, writes Kristen Lamb in USA Today. The US Geographical Survey cautioned, do not panic. Well, my first guest, my only guest today is no stranger to you. Very talented lady. She uses stopthecrime.net, that's her website, and her YouTube channel to discuss these issues and much more. And for some years now, she's been revealing documentation and briefings that prove that there is a global agenda, a multifaceted global agenda to transform society on many levels, including using mass technological disruption and weather warfare. Stopthecrime.net. Thanks to her for coming back on this programme. Welcome back, Deborah Tavares. Deborah, welcome back. How are you? And she's gone, has she? She has gone. Let's try her again. Strange that, isn't it? Yeah, that's kind of strange. It could be, there could be a fault on the old line there. We'll see if she's there. And we'll try and get her back on. Bear with me. And I've double checked the number and it's the right number. Deborah, welcome back. Sorry we lost you for a second there. How are you?
Well, thank you so much, Richie. I am fine, as well as one can be expected living in a surreal reality.
Surreal for you there. As I was introducing you, I was reading an article which is in USA Today this morning. Kristen Lamb asking, is the big one coming? There were a number of earthquakes yesterday, as you've been reporting, of course, on Tuesday, following on from the earthquakes earlier on this month. And of course, it's not just California, it's Alaska as well. You're well and you're in good shape yourself anyway, because it must be a concern for people living on the Pacific coast, on the West Coast.
Well, not actually, Richie. What is very interesting, and I want to address that, but I also want to let all the listeners know that we will be talking about breaking and developing stories and how we are being divided and conquered. But to the earthquake conversation, we had a big one on July the 4th of 2019 in Kern County, which is in the Southern California area just outside of Los Angeles. It was originally reported at magnitude 6.6, but they downgraded it to 6.4, which is a hefty shake. Now, everyone needs to keep in mind there are some reasons for the locations of these earthquakes. Certainly, when we hear about an earthquake, we look to see if there is a reservoir in the area, and if there are geothermal operations. And the reason that we look for that is geothermal operations require injections, much like fracking. And they drill many, many well holes. In fact, we're here 45 minutes away from the world's largest geothermal operation in the mountains just above Sonoma County. And there are seismic monitors all over the mountains there, because if they inject, now your listeners will get a kick out of this. It's horrid, actually. But we discovered that the wastewater treatment plant here in Santa Rosa pipes 40 miles of urine and fecal and pharmaceutical mixed combinations of human debris up this mountain 40 miles away. And they inject this into these well holes. Some of these well drills are 13,000 feet in depth. Most of them are about 8,000 feet in depth. And this is what is used to generate electricity in this area. But the geothermal operation has for its years caused many earthquakes. In fact, many of the people that live in that area have never even been compensated for broken windows, fireplaces that have fallen off, etc. Now, on stopthecrime.net, which I would certainly ask everyone to go to our YouTube channel, we toured this wastewater treatment plant that pipes this 40 miles of garbage sewer up there that they inject into the geothermal plant. We also toured the geothermal plant. So everyone listening can watch these two operations as we toured them in person on the ground, and we show you exactly what is happening. Now, these geothermal operations cause quakes. So do reservoirs and dams. They cause quakes. And I spend quite a bit of time, as you know, Richie. I attended a conference in England a couple months ago, the AV conference with Ian Crane, and gave a talk. And my talk included fake lakes make quakes. And that is the take-home, what everyone needs to understand about reservoirs. Ever since these reservoirs became the method of collecting the secondary water cycle, which is rain and snowmelt, which was never how we needed to distribute our water supply, earthquakes have occurred. And the reason for that is when you restrict water and you cause what is the terminology impoundment, but it's like an overbearing of structural load on the geological rocks and material underneath, and the water causes lubrication of these geological structures. So when these reservoirs fill up in the winter, and then they're released, some of the water then is released during the winter and then summer months, that causes a shifting of the plates underneath, and that induces earthquakes. So for any and all earthquakes that people hear about, the first thing you want to look for is there a lake nearby? And if it is it a reservoir? And are there geothermal operations? And is it anywhere near the Ring of Fire? And this would apply worldwide. So what I would really like to encourage everyone to do right now, Richie, is we have posted a 5-part series on genocide documents and how murder is legal. And it is a 5-part series up on stopthecrime.net on our YouTube video channel that walks everybody through the genocidal policies that we will be discussing today a bit, and how this happened, and how we were all deceived. And we go through that, and I would really hope that people would share this. Again, some of these were only released just a week ago. But I want to talk about, of course we're going to have increased earthquakes, because earthquakes, of course, are induced not only by the fracking and the geothermal operations and the impoundment of the water on the reservoirs, but also because there are underground nuclear tests in many of these areas that set off earthquakes as well.
And people don't know about these. The underground nuclear test is very interesting because I think you and I spoke about this before. Deborah Tavares is our guest today, if you're just joining the programme. Talk about underground nuclear testing because, again, that will be new information to many people listening to this programme. They'll be aghast. I mean, for many people listening, they'll be surprised to even hear about induced earthquakes because they will imagine earthquakes are something that happen when tectonic plates move under the ground, and it's a natural phenomenon. Again, just reminding you, Deborah, that a lot of our listeners are coming through mainstream radio, commercial radio, and this will be new information to them. I'm glad they're hearing it, by the way, but this is very good stuff.
Well, I can appreciate that, Richie, because there was a time when we were in Southern California and there were literally a swarm of earthquakes. Yeah. And during that period of time in the 90s, we sustained quite a bit of structural damage. And I thought earthquakes were a variety of reasons. Never would I have ever known what I now know. I didn't know then. And I'm looking at a book, a very important book. It's called Weather Warfare, The Military's Plan to Draft Mother Nature. And it is by Jerry E. Smith, S-M-I-T-H. And I'm just reading the back cover right now, and it says, underground nuclear tests in the Nevada desert have set off earthquakes. A Russian company has been offering to sell typhoons on demand since the 90s, and scientists have been searching for ways to move hurricanes for over 50 years. So we know that weather modification was originally in the form of cloud seeding to increase the snowpacks in the Sierras and more to suppress hail. But now it's an everyday affair, and hundreds of environmental and wealthier modifying technologies have been patented in the United States and worldwide. And our weather is fully controlled and manipulated.
And you pointed out to me before, Deborah, sorry to interrupt, you pointed out to me before that way back in the 1970s, the nations of the world, most of them, signed an agreement not to use weather warfare against one another. That was maybe a dead giveaway at the time that a lot of technology already existed.
Well, that's absolutely true. In fact, there was a quote in April of 1997 where the United States Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, declared that there are terrorists at work who are engaging even in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes, remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. And I want to say that this has expanded and has now become what people refer to as climate change. And when I say that with a tremendous amount of danger behind this, because we have kids that are now out of school that believe that climate change is anthropogenic, in other words, human-caused. Yeah. And they do believe there are too many people using too much stuff. They absolutely believe their lives are in danger, and they must stop climate change at all cost. And I can tell you, climate change at all cost, to stop it, is not possible. And really what's behind it is an absolute global disruption and a recreation of a new economy. And when I first got a hold of the report from Iron Mountain, Richie, I did not know what it was. I didn't understand what John F. Kennedy had been saying about there's a monolithic, ruthless conspiracy. I didn't understand what was meant by those words of those days, that it would conscript every aspect of military, that it would influence, there would be invasions. It would be infiltration instead of invasions, and subversion instead of elections. And he talked about intimidation instead of free choice, guerrillas by night instead of armies by day, And he said it's a system that has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Yeah, yeah. You know, today, Deborah. Sorry again.
Yeah.
You know, today, the Extinction Rebellion group have caused absolute chaos in Bristol today, a city which is south of me, not too far from London, by disrupting traffic. And again, it speaks to you mentioning there that this is being sold to the very young who don't know any better, and we get annoyed with them.
Well, they've been socially engineered through an educational system that has been creating the false reality, and they are actually, in fact, there's a very interesting quote, and I would recommend everybody download and read and put in their library a 43-page document called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Because in there's this quote, and it says, the quality of education given to the lower class, that's all of us, must be of the poorest sort, so that the mote of ignorance, isolating the inferior class from the superior class, is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower-class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. And we know that John D. Rockefeller said, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And as far as the Extinction Rebellion goes, this is an example of the mind control that has swept our countries. This is the extreme danger that we are now in, because climate change has been invented. It's an invention. And when I first read the report from Iron Mountain, which came out soon after John F. Kennedy was murdered in the mid-'60s, I still didn't understand the enormity of what that report meant. And as time has gone by, and I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of documents, that report speaks to me and others now more and more. And we do have on stopthecrime.net, on our YouTube video channel, we have the YouTube of the report from Iron Mountain. Now that is and was done by a Christian organization that aligns it with biblical prophecies, but it is in part the report as well. The actual report does not align itself with biblical prophecies, but does talk about the annual numbers of people to be exterminated every single year.
Even down to the exact number. This is really interesting now, because we've talked about Georgia Guidestones, and we've talked about the plans to reduce the population by as much as 4/5, maybe just to leave 500 million left on the planet. So it's really interesting that you're telling me that they even break it down with a annual number. That's amazing.
Well, it's even worse than that now, but just so that people will be compelled to minimally listen to the YouTube report from Iron Mountain. Just understand that it talks about the reestablishment of slavery and the organized repression of minority groups and the deliberate intensification of air and water pollution and the long-range planning and budgeting, again, of the optimal number of lives to be destroyed annually in overt warfare.
Wow.
So people need to understand that climate change was invented to replace war. It was the elite's idea and plan that they needed to come up with something so horrific, so dangerous, so affronting to the existence of life that people would bow down to it, and they invented climate change.
I was sorry, Deborah, I was thinking of you today, obviously because you were coming on. But you see, I would have thought this was all crazy stuff some years ago. But this afternoon, the BBC in London reported that Elon Musk yesterday gave a presentation. Maybe he did it early this morning, but he did it yesterday, for Neuralink, a company he set up. They've just asked the FDA to allow them to trial on human patients the placement of a microchip in their brains that will link up with a computer. Now that speaks to everything that you're telling me today, because if you want people to comply or to acquiesce to the agenda that you've just described, a wonderful way would be a near future where people have superhuman cognition, where we are basically merged with AI through a chip on the brain. And Musk wants to begin putting these chips in people next year, Deborah. And he's asked the FDA to go along
I
with
would submit that chips have been being put into people now for
already.
many decades. And that is the targeted individual community.
Yeah.
They have been experimented on, tortured, traumatized, and murdered for decades in order to come to a moment where Elon Musk would talk about chips. Now, this is extremely important, and I discuss this in that 5-part video series, again, on Stop the Crime. It's a document that we received from a whistleblower a number of years ago. It's called the Aquarius Group Operation Briefing. And it is the planned chemical sedation of the population using radio microwave frequencies for mass mind control. And they talk about the electromagnetic, radio waves, and microwave pulse mind warfare has great advantages in that the desired subject or populations have no knowledge of the procedures being implemented. And they go on to talk about mind control and chemical and polypharmaceutical saturation has been already achieved over the previous 20 years of implementation with this process in mind of global mind control and its purposeful covert introduction into population areas. In some cases, this is achieved by deliberate overt introduction through exposure or consumption on behalf of the population's base in everyday usage of public water and airborne pollutants and chemical agents in a wide variety of foodstuffs as well, even chemicals on our clothes. So this is the kind of information I cover on that 5-part video series. I also cover points in the NASA war document that talk about Trojan horse everything. But I want to just read this right now, and this aligns itself with what you just spoke about with Elon Musk. And it says, the emergence of a planet-wide electronic communications grid connecting the thoughts and feelings of billions of people and linking them to rapidly expanding volumes of data to a fast-growing web of sensors being embedded secretly throughout the world and to increasingly intelligent devices, robots, and thinking machines, the smartest of which already exceed the capabilities of humans in performing a growing list of discrete mental tasks and may soon surpass people in manifestations of intelligence. We have always assumed we would remain the unique species on this planet. So what Elon Musk also said, while he's concerned about AI taking over, he's basically saying, or did say, that in order to compete with it, we have to link up.
Yeah.
And we're being told that we have to. So this is mind control warfare. This is Earth in upheaval. And we are living in critical times for the type of human that we are today, because we are being outsourced. We are being replaced. But I want to talk about, I could talk about the transhumanism agenda, but I would really rather talk about what people face on a day-to-day basis.
Let's do that.
Being transformed.
Let's do that. Just before you do that, let me remind our listeners who might be tuning in, it's coming up for 6 minutes to, it's actually 5.5 minutes to the top of the hour. It's Wednesday's Richie Allen Show live on Fab Radio 2. in Manchester. TuneIn Radio and multiple other channels as well. Triggerwarning.tv. Deborah Tavares is our guest. Go to stopthecrime.net, stopthecrime.net for the information and the documentation that Deborah has mentioned. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. For some time now, Deborah has been at the forefront of releasing and revealing documents given to her by whistleblowers to demonstrate that this is a real agenda, that it's not science fiction. It isn't the imagination of very creative people. This is actually happening, and we can see this. The proof of it now, I think, is in the pages of the mainstream newspapers every day. Like today, when Elon Musk says next year we'll start putting these chips in. But like you said, Deborah, before we start talking about how people are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, it was an important point you made, that this has been done to people, and I've interviewed people who've been targeted, very credible people, very believable people, and I'm very interested in nanotechnology and how some of this stuff is being ingested by people, maybe through geoengineering and other things you've talked about. But Deborah Tavares, our guest. Tweet the programme. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Lots of tweets already with questions for Deborah, but she's answering those questions as she's going along. Yes, Deborah, people are facing it.
Yes, now I'm going to go through some things, not necessarily in order of importance, but things that people need to know about. And if they do subscribe to stopthecrime.net, they will get our email blast outs as well, because we're sending out advisories. An example of one of the recent advisories is that e-bikes, electric bikes, cause fires. And it's the dangers of the lithium-ion batteries used in the majority of electric bikes. And it's an advisory. The e-bikes explode and catch on fire. And because of the nature of the batteries, it can take up to a half hour or so to try to get these fires out. And the explosion really does send a lot of the parts of the bike around the area. And there was an article I found about a cyclist runs for his life after his electric bike explodes in a fireball under his rear end. And it literally does show photographs of what happened, how he ran from this bike. These bikes also, in the charging process, can ignite the interior of a garage if that's where you're charging the battery for the e-bike. So this is an advisory. Be alert. The lithium-ion batteries cause fires, and we're being pushed into bikes and being moved out of cars. So I say that because I've received information out of Ireland. The same things are happening here in the United States and everywhere else, where petroleum, they call it fossil fuel, and we know that our petroleum never came from dead dinosaurs, but petroleum is being eliminated now as a fuel for cars. They're moving us into a redundant warfare system of electric vehicles. That is another weaponized assault on us. And it is a confinement technique to keep us within a parameter of allowed travel. Our traveling is being reduced massively. And what was interesting, Richie, is in the United States, we have what is called the red states and the blue states. And the political division, of course, is just a hoax because we're USA Inc. We're actually Earth Inc. We don't have right or left. We don't have voting opportunities. We're run on autopilot through United Nations policies and through the IMF, the World Bank, international bankers, etc. I discuss that again in that 5-part YouTube series that I have up. But the red and blue states are defined as the red being the Republicans and the blue being the Democrats. And they're saying because of differences in the idea of climate change, some states will be allowing gasoline-driven vehicles and some states will not. And the concern is, so what do you do when you're traveling over the border with your gas-powered vehicle or petroleum when the state you're going into does not want fossil fuel to increase their greenhouse gas emissions? Of course, all of that is a lie. So we're being divided up. And Richie, I want to go over the recent fire situation here, not only here in Northern California where we've had blazes since 2017, of course before that as well, but the most significant blazes in 2017 and 2018. I want to go over what's happening now with the fire.
Just before you do, Deborah, just before you do, let me just for those listeners who are new to the show and come through Fab Radio and elsewhere, we've got Deborah Tavares on the line. StopTheCrime.net. Check it out. Go to the YouTube channel. Before you do talk about the fires, and I was going to bring them up anyway because we had a fascinating conversation last time. So the listener who is new to this and ordinarily gets their information from the BBC, they will say, okay, I've heard about these wildfires in California and elsewhere. My understanding is that very dry conditions, very heat waves, very dry weather give or lay the conditions for accidental fires or even for fires that were started deliberately by some bad people, and they spread and they do a lot of damage. So that will be the understanding of somebody who gets their information from the BBC, but you know differently.
Well, yes, and many people now in this area know differently, and many more people throughout the world are starting to realize that these fires are caused by a multiple layer of intentional assaults. Assaults, of course, being directed energy weapons, which does include using energy of the ability to control the weather conditions. So I will describe what the beginning of a fire season looks like here. Then I'm going to talk about what is happening now and where all of you, everyone listening, where you're going to be taken with this. So first I'm going to describe what we have noticed across the board prior to heavy fires. Now we're talking about the fires of 2017 that burned about 8,000 buildings where I live. Yeah. And then in 2018 burned Paradise. About 90% of Paradise in California is gone. And that was in 2018.
Extraordinary.
Everyone in these fires noticed heavy aerosol spraying programs the days before the fires. Now, for those of you that still don't understand the level of aerosol spraying, I would recommend that you go to toxicsky.org. That's another site that we run. I don't post to it regularly because my main site is stopthecrime.net and primarywater.org. But I do have some fundamental videos up there for people to watch. One is called What in the World Are They Spraying? It's a video.
Brilliant.
And also Why in the World Are They Spraying? I know the people that made these videos, and it is a very excellent way to learn about what has happened with the enormity of the absolute control of the weather. So again, days before the fires, we are heavily chemtrailed. The humidity is dropped where we have really dry conditions as a result of the ability to control humidity, as well as hot conditions, very hot, and then the wind kicks up. Then, oftentimes, the smart meters are pulsed. When you pulse the smart meter, you can modulate the frequencies, you can cause fires. Now, the utilities throughout the world are controlled by Rothschild, LLC, and Company. And we discovered that a number of years ago, quite by accident. But I can tell you that now is knowledge that people know. So the smart grid was and is a global plan for domination of energy resources. And when that grid is pulsed, there are house fires. You can type in smart meters, electric smart meters, and house fires. You will be stunned at the reports of houses that have caught on fire and have burned.
Wow. Right,
And
this is huge. Right. I'm very interested here because they're in the UK too, these meters.
The smart meters are pulsed. Also, we know that and this is very interesting, and we learned this right after we burned here in 2017, that we are adding to the electromagnetic frequency in the environment by all of our wireless devices in our homes. And what do I mean by that? People now have Wi-Fi, cell phones, wireless computers, laptops, smart appliances, smart meters. They are so electrified in the environment. And then you add to that all the heavy metals that are sprayed from the overhead aerosol spraying programs, and you get combustibility. And so much of what is happening with the fires as we have seen them is house-to-house ignition. And we went actually to the town of Paradise in 2018 with 2 retired firefighters that between the 2 of them have 60 years experience. Actually, they were fire captains, retired fire captains. We discovered a smart meter blown up it was in a large case the size of a refrigerator, freestanding in a parking lot. It was on the grounds of a school. The school mostly burned. Again, this was in Paradise. When we opened up the doors to this box that had no exterior fire evidence at all, in other words, the flames had not darkened the exterior of this cabinet, the smart meter had blown up inside and had melted. We were looking around for smart meters, but as I said, the majority of Paradise was gone. And so we know the smart meters were involved as well. We know that they have space-based weapons and lasers. Many people during those fires saw the lasers. We saw the night of the fires in 2017 small flashes of light. And we were hit so abruptly at 1 a.m. when it really kicked up. And we were caught off guard. Our community did not have any sirens. They didn't engage any of the fire departments to go down the streets with their sirens. The reason they said they didn't do that is they didn't want to cause panic and have the roadways clogged up. Well, that fire burned up about 24 people that were trying to escape the areas. A number of people were even trapped in their garages because they did not know how to disengage their garage door. And I have family members who lost their homes, barely got out alive when they were knocking on neighbors' doors, trying to wake up neighbors at 1 a.m. as the fire that was traveling faster and hotter than any fires that firefighters were accustomed to fighting in earlier days, just ravaged through the neighborhoods. And I can tell you, in talking to many of the firefighters who were in the fires here, the common definition is that they've never fought fires this fast or this hot before.
That's what they say.
So then the next question, Richie, is what kind of fires are they fighting? And I can tell you, the firefighters are not prepared to fight these types of fires because they don't know the fires that they need to engage against. Now, here's what has happened. Recently, as of a week ago, there was a study released, and it talks about how about 150 firefighters that fought the fires here in Northern California in 2017 had blood and urine levels that tested with high levels of mercury and other toxins as a result of fighting in these fires. Now, let's talk about this for a minute.
How do we know this now? How do we know this? How do we know that some of the firefighters were testing very high for levels of mercury? How did you come by this information?
Yeah, there was a test through a university, actually, that started taking these tests a month after the fires. And they were talking about how they did this testing to see what the firefighters might have. And these are preliminary results, and the testing started in November, and they tested about 150 firefighters that fought in the Tubbs fire, and they backed that against firefighters that did not go to the Tubbs fires, just to see the difference in geography.
That makes sense, doesn't it? That makes sense. That's the sort of thing that academics do. It's the sort of thing that a university does. Studies like that. It makes perfect sense to me. We've had these firefighters in this crazy environment. Let's test them against those who didn't. So it makes sense. And mercury was showing up. That's hugely interesting.
And that's true. Now, they're not discussing where the mercury came from.
Right.
But we know that many household items burned, including CFL lights.
Right.
And light bulbs contain high levels of mercury. In fact, when you go to the EPA website, you're being told how you need to clean up the vapor and the broken lights of CFL lights and what you need to do. So we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lamps throughout the fire area burning up that certainly had the mercury light bulbs in them. And it says on the EPA website that before you clean up these broken light bulbs, not to talk about ones that have burned, it says have people and pets leave the area and air out the area for 5 to 10 minutes and open up the doors. Shut off the central air conditioning and heating systems. Collect materials needed to clean up the broken bulb. And they talk about how you clean it up. They say do not vacuum. Vacuuming is not recommended unless broken glass remains after all cleanup steps have been taken. And they say that these bulbs cannot be placed in the landfills. And this was something interesting that we found out because we called the Sonoma County landfill and the cleanup for toxic materials. We learned that the county had not signed up for a local distribution drop-off center for the light bulbs, even when people are told they should not go into the landfills. I can tell you that the CFL light bulbs and other toxic light bulbs end up in the landfills, and it poisons the groundwater that leaches out of the landfill, and it was part of what was happening here after all of the fires.
Poisons the land, makes the land.
There are many other toxins.
Yeah, and this is a part of an agenda you've talked about for a very long time. You poison the land, you poison the water, and then an entire area becomes uninhabitable. An entire area.
That's exactly right.
Vast.
That's right.
Wow. And then, you'll be aware of this because I know you've spoken with an Irish journalist called Gemma O'Doherty, whom I know. So you'll be aware that the Irish Taoiseach, and the Irish Taoiseach is the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, he's recently been talking about, wait for it, I know you'll know this, Deborah, but some of our listeners won't. He's recently been talking about the need to move people into urban settlement zones, to get people into cities and high-rise buildings, because we need to leave the land alone and we've got to move off the countryside, move away from, rural areas. It all comes together, doesn't it, Deborah? When listening to you, you join the dots and it all comes together, right?
Well, it absolutely does. And for the listeners, I can tell you that this journey that I've been on has been many, many years.
Yeah.
The journey has been extremely difficult. I call the phases of my dismay truth trauma because I go through very deep times of just shock. Even though I'm aware of what's happening and I tumble through it and I look at the documents, I am still traumatized from time to time because it is so severe. It's not what I ever thought my world would be, nor I'm sure many of you never thought this would be your world either.
Did you go through denial, Deborah? Did you ever go through a denial phase? Were you ever in a phase, somebody like you, when you had a kind of a block and you started to deny? Because that's understandable. I mean, it might not have happened to you, but I've spoken to researchers who had a phase where the brain convinced them that it's not happening. It couldn't be. You're having some sort of episode. Relax.
Yeah, no, not me. I can understand where people would just become so fearful that they would deny it to be true.
Yeah.
But the problem, the reality for me is I get into the documents, and there is no denying it. When I, for example, look at a climate action plan, which I talk about, every city, everywhere throughout the entire world has a climate action plan. And that is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to change the weather, which is, of course, insanity. That's not possible. But when I look at the climate action plans, I find that it's a new business. It's a global disruption creating a new business based on falses, just like the idea that fossil fuels are running out. In fact, before I get into the climate action plan, I found something rather disturbing and interesting at the same time, and it's a report out of China. And let me find this. Here it is. It says about half of China's loans to developing countries are hidden, a study finds. Now, this is interesting because I look at this as a blame game, because I know that China's bank works with the IMF and works with the World Bank, and they all work together. But this is how they're exposing what they're doing to undeveloped countries with sequestering their resources, in other words, collateralizing against their debt. So here's what they say. China's lending to other countries has surged in the past decade, causing debt levels to jump dramatically, and as much as half of such debt is in developing economies is hidden, a new study has found. Such hidden debt means that the borrowing isn't reported to or reported by official institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the World Bank, or the Paris Club, a group of creditor nations. Go on. Between 2000 and 2017, other countries' debt owed to China soared tenfold. And they go on that this was discovered by a Germany-based think tank called the Kiel, K-I-E-L Institute for the World Economy. And this has transformed China into the largest official creditor, easily surpassing the IMF or the World Bank. Now, they go on to talk about the effects on third world countries. Before I continue with that, I want to say that the United Nations just announced that its fight against hunger is failing because of climate change. Now, this is just another way to say that, sadly, millions of people will die because of food scarcity, because of increased weather manipulation. Yeah. But let's go on with this, with China controlling other countries. It says lower-income developing economies mostly receive direct loans from China's state-owned banks, often at market rates and backed by collateral such as oil. So, in other words, China is loaning money to other countries collateralized by their country's oil. It goes on. China has been criticized for saddling many countries with debt through its Belt and Road Initiative, a mammoth global infrastructure investment plan to build rail, road, sea, and other routes stretching from China to Central Asia, Africa, and Europe. The problem of this hidden debt is particularly severe in countries such as Venezuela, Iran, and Zimbabwe. It goes on that the Harvard's professor at the Kennedy School of Government recently spoke on the hidden debt issue at a forum in Singapore and said many loans taken from Chinese lenders had needed to be restructured or renegotiated. Such borrowers include Sri Lanka, Ukraine, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bangladesh, and Cuba. Hidden debt is an issue in tackling debt sustainability in such developing economies if the exact amount owed to China aren't known, which the World Bank and the IMF have previously flagged. Now, I just want to say they're all working together, and so they're only exposing the plan of literally collateralizing against other countries' resources. That's what this is. And I just want to bring this forth because there's other things I really would like to cover rather than this, but this is just another aspect of the takedown.
Very interesting.
I wanted to talk about some recent executive orders. First, I want to talk about the 5G executive order. Many of you may know that the CEO, which is President Trump of USA Inc., signed an executive order on January 8th of 2018. It's Executive Order 13821 to quickly facilitate broadband rollout through rural America, stretching to every farmhouse everywhere, bypassing all regulations and restrictions, and including any restrictions on tribal lands. This is an expeditious rollout. I'll let you take a look at this executive order for yourself, but I want everyone to know one thing. The United States does not run through Congress votes, Senate votes, or through the President. The United States is run by executive orders. We were collateralized during the bankruptcy of 1933 by the international bankers, the IMF, and the United Nations. And again, I talk about this in that 5-part video series that we have posted up. And I can only pray that everyone listening will listen to that. It is a summation that took many years, many thousands of documents to finally come to that assessment. And the next federal executive order I want everyone to know about, and it's one dated June the 11th of 2019. It's going to affect all of you, wherever you are in this world. It's Executive Order 13874, and it's on modernizing the regulatory framework for our agriculture by using biotechnology products. So GMO is now fully legal on all levels everywhere in the food supply, and it is authorized by executive order.
And you're right.
So I want to talk about...
Yeah, it's true. Because again, just I have to confirm this stuff. It's my job as the interviewer. She's right, Deborah. She's absolutely spot on. That's exactly what's happened. And I guess, Deborah, there was little or no coverage of this by your media. None, basically. Because I can't find any news stories on it.
That's absolutely correct. And
nothing.
What I've been doing is I've been going to our local city councils and board of supervisors, not because they have any jurisdiction on anything, because all they're doing is they're running cities that are incorporated, and they're running through UN policies. That's happening wherever you are.
Yeah.
UN policies, we're on autopilot. We have no say. And your city elected officials that you think are elected and doing service for you are running United Nations policies. In fact, I recently attended a meeting where they admitted they have no jurisdiction. And in fact, Richie, the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors that I go to occasionally has recently installed TSA-style security guards and equipment so that before you can go in now and even participate or listen to the meeting, you have to be fully checked. And this is in anticipation of people starting to catch on that their lands are being stolen. We have a number of operations fully deployed here in the United States, and everyone else, you do too.
This is horrendous. This is horrendous. Can I have 20 seconds, Deborah? Give me 20 seconds to explain what this executive order was in simple language. Deborah Tavares is the first person I've come across to bring this up. I barely remember back in June, because I read every newspaper in the world, well, not quite, but most, and I barely remember seeing something about this, and I shelved it, and I didn't come back to it. And you're the only person that's talked about this. Let me just very quickly explain what this is. This executive order basically removes regulation and oversight completely from biotechnology companies and lets them ride roughshod over natural farming and centuries worth of farming practice in the United States of America. This is no joke. It effectively streamlines. The biotech companies had a party when Trump issued this executive order because it basically gives them license to do whatever they want in the United States. Sorry, Deborah, I had to say that. Back to you. Unbelievable.
Well, that's a very good, quick analogy of this.
Yeah.
And that's exactly correct. And this is an executive order with international implications as well, because the executive order talks about working with the international community on the biotech. This is food science. This is GMO. And the reason that they're saying that we need to change now into GMO is because of food scarcity and climate change. Now, many of your listeners may recall, maybe not, that the United States, in the central part of the United States, Indiana and other states, over the past 8 or so months, we were trounced by atmospheric rivers, a new term for created water dumps from overhead by weather weapons. Farmers lost millions and millions of acres. There were over 1 million private wells that were contaminated from the levee breaches, etc. Now, I want to add this real quick right now because everyone needs to know that. And again, I cover this in that 5-part video series. But, Richie, we found some documents on the instability of the global infrastructure because of climate change. Now, what is defined as the global infrastructure? Roads, bridges, wastewater treatment plants, reservoirs, levees, dams, etc. They say that these infrastructures have not been maintained, that with the climate change now and the increased weather events, there will be failures. And countries will not have enough money to replace these failing infrastructure in their countries. They're going to have to take out loans. But many of the dams, roads, bridges will fail. This has been the plan all along. When I did a YouTube video a number of years ago called Water Wars, Controlling Water for Profit and Power, I found these plans out of the UK and out of Israel, and I talk about it in that YouTube. That YouTube needs to be resurrected. Water Wars, Stealing Water for Profit and Power, because even the nuclear facilities have not been maintained, and this is all part of a plan. We've been booby-trapped worldwide. Now we're finding that our food supply is going to be engineered. I covered the engineering of the food because many unused manufacturing and commercial buildings in New Jersey in the United States have been growing under LED lights with no soil and a concoction of scientific solution, have been growing vegetables. And they can grow vegetables much faster, much more supply. They say it's healthier. It's all based on scientific concoctions to create the food supply. We're being told that conventional agriculture is wasteful now, that it's highly toxic and contaminated, which it is, because sadly, many of the farmers that needed to sell their products and would be subsidized during bad years were forced to use fertilizers and chemicals in order to meet the subsidy requirements. I never knew this. I never knew they were forced to use certain chemicals, or they would not be reimbursed for the inability to market their goods. So we have mass contamination through the groundwater and farming communities. We have controlled weather events now to move us in to a completely centralized, controlled fake food supply, where even meat now is being created from cells from live animals. They're creating chicken, they're creating beef. This is all real. And I have on the website something that is just deplorable, and I don't know how many people were aware. But, Richie, I was on a radio show out of Mexico a number of years ago talking about smart meters, and I was asked during a break if I knew about Senomyx, Senomyx, and I did not know what that was. Well, I came to learn that that was a concocted chemical, an excitochemical, using aborted fetal tissue in the food supply. which enhances our taste buds, and it's on the labels as a natural food ingredient.
Oh, no.
So those of you can take a look, go to stopthecrime.net, just type in Senomix, Senomyx. Understand, these types of horrific food additives and changes have been occurring for decades.
Why would somebody do that, Deborah? Because let me jump in, because again, I've got to jump in there, because again, listeners will be incredulous at a lot of what they've heard. I'm not, because I've read much of what you've been discussing myself, so I'm not incredulous. But listeners are, and their minds are blown when they hear stuff like this. The aborted fetal cells. People hear this on a program like this, and they say, "No way. No way. Why would anybody want to do that?" Can you address that just for 2 minutes? Why would somebody do that?
Yeah, well, the sad reality, Richie, is, and I appreciate you're trying to break it down for those that may think that this is not possible.
Yeah.
But it's because people have not been open-minded. They have had certain levels of conditioning and mind control. And this is why we're in the place that we're in now, is so many people have closed minds. And I can say this for myself, because when I first heard about weather weapons and the use of climate, I simply could not believe it. I remember sitting on the floor in shock, thinking this isn't possible, and then talking every day to Rosalind Peterson, a few hours north of me, who had a website called California Skywatch. Rosalind has since passed away the last couple of years, but I spoke with her multiple times a day. I was in such shock over hearing what many of you may be hearing Richie and I talking about. But I realized it was through the programming, the lies, and the education that is false, that doesn't allow us to live in reality. And I felt, as I started to get a handle on the facts and realize it was true, I became really angry. I felt extremely violated. I felt like it had been treason and fraud. And I wanted to find out how far all of this went, and I haven't found the bottom of it. But I want to jump back into fire, because why this is so important is fire is a big business. These are intentionally created, and when they target a community, they also send in ghost armies. What do I mean by that? There are people that come in disguised as federal agents, or just wearing rifles on the side of their camo outfits, that go through these areas while they're still on fire, Richie. And they break into houses. In fact, there's a book written called Point Patrol. And it was written by some survivors of the 2017 fire that went back into the fire-ravaged area because one fella did not leave. And he was apparently a retired firefighter. And he stayed behind to try to save the homes. And he was able to save about 9 or 10 homes. When the other people got there, they saw paint written on the road that trespassers or looters will be shot. And he had a gun. And he was dousing out the embers as they were landing in the mulch. Again, wood mulch is a real serious problem. But there were hundreds of looters during the fires, Richie, that were brought in to continue and add to the chaos. They were going up the creeks in disguise and camo outfits. It's impossible to imagine. And when I hear myself even saying this, it sounds unimaginable, except that I witnessed it with my own eyes. And I saw them walking around the communities, the houses that had been vacated or evacuated. They had colored X's on the front of the sidewalks to indicate that no one was there. Now, certainly the first responders would want to know if people were there because they would want to evacuate them if the fire continued. But those were the houses that were getting broken into and then caught on fire. Another very interesting thing with the rebuilds is that the Department of Energy requires a new type of window. And this is all part of the retrofitting requirements that all of you that are listening are going to have to do to your homes based on the need to stop climate change, which is, again, a big business. It's not real. It's being controlled by weather weapons. But they want these high-efficiency, low-E windows. And we found out, we have a blast out on the email blast out of stopthecrime.net. We discovered that these high-efficiency, low-E windows, it's a certain type, catch and cause fires. When the sun shines on them, Richie, it creates a magnifying beam. And for those that know that there are heavy metals in the atmosphere, it literally ignites and starts fires. And when I first discovered this, it was with somebody who had lost their home in the fires, had rebuilt a home, and their neighbor's house with these new windows started a fire in the backyard, and their new house nearly caught on fire because of these windows. Now, these windows are not disclosed. You will not find this being discussed by the window manufacturers because we were builders in our business days. I was appalled. I was stunned to find out that major window manufacturers do not talk about the fire component of this specific low-E energy windows. And the only place that we have found this discussed at all is in the Trex is a manufactured deck material, Trex, T-R-E-X. In their installation discussion, they say do not put Trex down where there are the high-efficiency low-E windows. And that's the only place that we have found any warning about the windows that catch on fire. Just like I spoke at the beginning of the program about the low-E lithium-ion batteries on the low-E on the e-bikes catching on fire. No one is talking about that. No. You can do your own research. You need to understand much of what is out there now for civilian use has been Trojan horsed and weaponized. Again, I know this sounds crazy. It is crazy, but this is facts, and it's going to get a lot worse, a lot worse. So for those of you that still are in question, likely you're going to be the percentage that is on a website called Deagle.com, and I cover this in an interview with Dr. Bill Deagle, not the same Deagle as the Deagle.com website. It is on stopthecrime.net. It is called the 5G elimination of population, something like that, with Dr. Bill Deagle. We talk about the Deagle.com website that divulges the numbers of global reductions of population by the year 2025. The UK, as I recall, has about a 73% reduction of population. Australia is about 50% reduction of the population. The United States is about 83% reduction of population. That's the best of my memory right now.
That's the plan, you think, for 2025? You think that's what they want to achieve by 2025? Because that's incredible.
There is no question.
Yeah, because
there is no question.
We're 6 years away from that. Again, there will be people listening to this and they will say, nonsense, it's not going to happen. We're not going to lose 73% of the UK population by 2025 in 6 years' time. That's what people will be saying. I find it hard to imagine myself, even though I'm with you that 5G is a killer. It has beyond grave implications for human health. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I've done a lot of research myself. I've spoken to many people. But 73% in 6
Richie,
years.
It's not just the 5G. I mean, look at the smart meters. Look at the cell phone towers. Look at all of the wireless conveniences that people have. Their cell phones. We know that's a weapon.
Yeah.
I've talked to Barry Trower. I have an interview up with Barry called Cooking of Humanity.
Yeah.
So people can take a look at that. I mean, we have been layered with killing frequencies. In fact, I think that Ollie Johansson explained it the best. He's a scientist researcher out of the Karolinska Institute.
Yeah, great guy. Yeah.
And he said this, and I felt that this was the easiest way to wrap my head around the frequency issue. He said anything that is above natural frequencies of the earth can cause human health effects. So obviously, as all of this escalates, now let's talk about what escalation looks like. As a result of weather weapons, we're talking floods, hurricanes, fires, coastal shore erosion, which you're experiencing in the UK.
Yeah.
You have assaults on your shoreline, just like with use of technologies that people don't even know about, Richie.
Yeah.
People don't know
Unaware, totally.
that blast wave accelerators are being used to increase coastal shore erosion. Again, I can only recommend that people go to the YouTube series we have up, because we didn't know that there were technologies being used in the oceans that caused erosion, increased the wave activity along the coastlines, until we saw something very interesting. But I want to get back to the frequencies. It's been layered up slowly. We have been becoming very sick. Our immune systems have been degraded substantially. Most people have been vaccinated. The increased frequencies activate the dormant viruses that are vaccinated into us. There's a very, very important 3-part series of YouTubes that I would recommend people watch. It's called Tolerance Lost, and it is by Dr. Andrew Mulden, Moulden. Now, I do have that up on stopthecrime.net for people to take a look at. Understand what has happened to us. There are people still thinking some vaccinations are good because the CDC says so. Well, the CDC is promoting vaccinations. That's its job.
Yeah, of course.
Is to promote vaccines.
Absolutely.
Even though they have whistleblowers within their science departments admitting that autism is as a result of the MMR vaccine and more. But I won't go into all of that. Right now, it's most important to understand the level of the assaults on our immune systems and the level of control of our thinking already.
You're right.
Because
you're right.
people are...
Yeah. You're right. Listen, I've got to say, we've never been as unhealthy. We've never been as susceptible to infection. You're absolutely right. I know you've talked about this for many years. I know you've written about it. I absolutely endorse that. And it's a multifaceted agenda. The environment being changed and manipulated and poisoned. I've no doubt. I just want to
GMO foods now.
Oh, the foods. And years ago when I first got into this, I talked to a man about abiotic stress, how Monsanto had the seed, the Terminator seed that would grow in soil that had been destroyed. And I started to think, well, who would destroy the soil? Let me just remind our listeners, because we've got about 8 minutes left after this. Deborah Tavares is our guest. I'm really grateful to Deborah for her time. I have great admiration for her because she backs up her conclusions with evidence that she's gleaned herself through her own research and through documentation given to her by whistleblowers, and I like that very much. StopTheCrime.net is where you'll find this information, and I do recommend you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Just look for Stop the Crime and find Deborah there. If you are new to this and your mind has been blown in the last hour and 15 minutes, or hour and 10 minutes and thereabouts, in the last 7 or 8 minutes we have left, Deborah, where would you like to go in the short time we have left today? And again,
well, I'm going to talk about
on.
a few documents that I have not covered, and everyone can download these for themselves. I'll go over a couple of these very briefly. One is called Banking on Climate Change, Fossil Fuel Finance Report Card, 2019. Now again, the giveaway is in all of these documents. They talk about fossil fuels. Our petroleum never came from dead dinosaurs. So that should be your first giveaway, that this is a satanic culling of humanity. These policies are genocidal policies. So let's talk about the level of assault that we face. Not only are we all going to be required within our communities through code enforcement to change out our appliances to everything wireless, so that your water can be turned off for overuse, your electricity can be turned off, and you can be tracked and monitored, and there will be a shame app if you exceed your use. This is very much in line with the social credit system that exists in China, but in different ways. So let's talk about this document again, Banking on Climate Change, Fossil Fuel Finance Report Card 2019. Let me just go over one of the important aspects in this document. It says what banks must do: prohibit all financing for all fossil fuel expansion projects and for companies expanding fossil fuel extraction and infrastructure. Did you hear that?
I did
Prohibit
hear it.
all financing. Then it says, commit to phase out all financing for fossil fuel extractions.
Don't know what happened there. Deborah just dropped out. Let me get her back. That was a bit strange, wasn't it? It went very loud there for a minute, and then she just dropped out. Deborah Tavares is our guest. I hope I get her back because this is really important. These plans. Don't know what happened there.
You have reached gate 24.
Right, I'm getting the message. Mind her now. I hope nothing has happened there. Let's see. It could be that the power went out on her handset because I think she was using a hands-free phone. We'll see, can we get her back on?
Hi, Richie.
We lost you momentarily. I'm glad we got you back. Phew. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I think that this is a very important document, and I think that everybody should download this and take a look at it. This is diabolical. We're heading into a green agenda, and I would like everybody to think of green as brown and death. It is nothing. They've literally hijacked the beautiful color of green, which is life, which really means death. So we're talking about the banking on climate change, and I was going over what the banks are being required to do now.
That's where we lost you. That's where we lost you. They're going to tell the banks you cannot finance business that relies on fossil fuels, which is a nonsense anyway. So that's a tyranny, right? That's a tyranny.
Well, and they say commit to phase out all financing for fossil fuel extraction and infrastructure on an explicit timeline that is aligned with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, I can tell you there is no way to limit that.
No.
And what they say in the documents, Richie, is that in order to have any effect on the temperature, we have to live in the timeline of 1750, the year 1750, before there was equipment and machinery. That is what is being prescribed in these documents. And all of you that are listening, I don't know that you're prepared to live that way. They go on. Prohibit all finance for projects in tar sands oils. Prohibit all financing for projects in coal mining or other coal power. Fully respect all human rights. They say this in conclusion. There is no respect for human rights. In fact, this is the decimation and murder of millions and millions of people worldwide. Now, what has happened? We've had clean, free energy available. We have been forced to use dirty energies. That is how the global economy has been set up, and now the rug is being pulled out from underneath all of us to massively cull the population because they're claiming that we've dirtied the earth.
Yeah.
No, we have been tricked. And now you know. Another very, very important document that I would wish that everyone would take a look at too, and this is also as diabolical. It's the Sustainability Report 2018 by Rothschild, and it's Cultivating Resilience to Contribute to a Changing World. Rothschild talks about lending to only the wealthy families worldwide in this document. Again, Sustainability Report for 2016. I do have that, I hope, posted on stopthecrime.net under Hot Topics. And I would urge everyone to start understanding these documents are real. What you're hearing is real. The reports are out, and you are, all of us, are set for elimination. We are the enemy. This is war against the people. Make absolutely no mistake. It says in this Rothschild document that Desmond D. Rothschild Group wishes to support the transition towards a sustainable economy and society by fostering partnerships between various players in the financial sector and its other stakeholders to help solve social and environmental problems by developing innovative financial solutions which create economic value. And that is verbatim. So I can tell you that we are being consumed by these technologies and by the fake science. They're saying that because of extreme weather events, they have these commitments that they're going to protect land. Now, I wanted to also say this because the coastlines are under attack with another type of weapons systems. I mentioned that. It's called the Blast Wave Accelerator. The Blast Wave Accelerator was created in World War II. It was called Operation SEAL, S-E-A-L, created by the United States in Auckland. All militaries worldwide are engaged in destruction. All militaries. Now, why do I say that? All of you can check this out for yourself, but watch the YouTube we have up called Coastlines Under Attack. You should look at the perimeter of England. You should look at the perimeter of Ireland and Wales. It's being destroyed. The low-lying coastal areas are being destroyed. And in fact, in Wales, there's an entire community being relocated.
That's right. They're going to decommission. They're going to decommission the town, and there isn't any hard evidence that the water level will rise sufficiently to concern the village. This is in Wales. You're absolutely right. I covered this. It's shocking. They're telling these people that in the next 20 years they're going to have to leave their houses. They won't get any money for them, and the whole town's going to be decommissioned. It's disgraceful. Right. It's called planned retreat. Yeah. We discovered this some months ago. It's worldwide. It's affecting all coastlines worldwide. We're having the same issues here along the coastlines of California. They're trying to move people off of a very wealthy beach community called Del Mar in Southern California, where the medium home prices are $2.5 million. And they're telling these people, now what planned retreat means is you walk away from your homes and let the ocean consume it, because they're telling you there's going to be erosion and sea level rise. And what this is the insurance companies are coming in, Richie. They're not providing insurance because these areas are being designated as flood and coastal erosion areas. So there will not be ownership capability unless you own your home free and clear, because mortgage holders require insurance. Absolutely. So what we have also discovered is that the insurance companies are involved. These are also all the big bankers. The insurance companies are going to force relocation of people into human settlement zones, because just as we have discovered in the fire areas here, people are not able to get insurance because the bulk of California now is designated as a high-risk fire area. Yeah. And they're going to set these fires. This is big business. Let me endorse what you just said about the coastal areas, because while I've jumped in a few times and challenged you on behalf of the audience, I've got to endorse that. It's absolutely true. It's shocking stuff, and I do urge people to go to stopthecrime.net, to go to the YouTube channel, because you can listen to Deborah on the YouTube videos and you can pause, take it in, you can check the documentation on the website, and it's a nicer way for new people who are new to this to figure it out. That's a good thing. I often advise people to do that with you specifically. Watch the videos, pause, have a look at the stuff on stopthecrime.net, and then resume. It's a good way to get your head around it, because it's horrifying. We've got about 2 minutes max left, Deborah. I really appreciate your time. I want to say a couple of things. You must know what you don't know, and you need to hurry up and find out what you don't know. Absolutely. And I would urge people to also take a look at our website, primarywater.org. We are not running out of water, but millions will die because they're being told that they are. And we're watching this happen in Dublin. They announced 70 days of water left. In South Africa, they said 0-day water. The 6th largest city in India right now is being targeted with the illusion that they're running out of water. We have primary water. Please, I cannot underscore enough
to go to stopthecrime.net, go to our YouTube videos, and understand the truth about water. There's an excellent YouTube that we did called Primary Water Explained. Primary Water Explained.
Yeah, it's brilliant. That. I saw that. It's excellent. And really good work, that. Really good. It's excellent. And people need to understand, if Coca-Cola, if Pepsi, if Nestle weren't siphoning billions of gallons of water out of the ground in some of these places that Deborah mentioned, there wouldn't be any issues with water. Not that there is anyway. It's great work, that, Deborah. It really is. Really good work, I have to say.
Richie, I can only tell you I would love to come back because
anytime.
It's going to be heating up here. We're going to have many fires. We're going to have a lot of disruption. And I am watching Luciferian policies as they are rolling out here, and they're rolling out worldwide. This is not exclusive to California.
No.
I hear many people say, California is under attack. Yes, it is. But so
everywhere else
is every place else. There's nowhere to hide, period. We're being chemtrailed. There are no borders. Keep in mind, that's all an illusion. The creation of borders was to create conflict, to create wars, to have militaries and armies so we could kill people.
Absolutely.
And I can't underscore all of this enough because this is our reality, Richie.
Listen, you're brilliant. Thanks for coming on. You're welcome back anytime. StopTheCrime.net, the YouTube channel you've been listening to, Deborah Tavares. It's shocking, but there is evidence to support it. Lots of it. Deborah, thanks. All the best to you there. Stay safe. And thanks for your time today. We genuinely appreciate it. Speak soon.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'll keep you posted.
Thanks,
Everybody
Deborah.
Be safe.
Brilliant. And you can subscribe to the mailing list at stopthecrime.net. You will be receiving the letters, the newsletters that come out from Deborah and her team there. Just about time for me to say thanks for listening to the programme. I'll be back with you again tomorrow. Ronald Reagan's former Assistant Treasury Secretary Paul Craig Roberts returns to the programme, and Johnny Vedmore joins me as well tomorrow. Johnny's an excellent reporter and writer. It's been a long time since Johnny was on. We're going to talk about some very interesting things on the show tomorrow, 5 o'clock. But as usual, before we even get to 5 o'clock, I'll be with you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. on the YouTube channel, where we'll have a giggle and we'll have a browse through the UK's national newspapers. I'm doing that every weekday morning at 9:30. That's 9:30 on youtube.com/Richie Allen Show. Shall I say it again? That is youtube.com/Richie Allen Show. Big shout out again to Deborah Tavares. Go to stopthecrime.net. It won't cost you anything. Go to the YouTube channel, and if it is new to you, and if it is horrifying, if it is inexplicable, if it is crazy, and if it leaves you shaking your head saying that is tinfoil hat conspiracy lunacy, it's not. Believe me, it isn't. Go to stopthecrime.net. Check it out for yourself. Gonna love you and leave you then with some Neil Diamond, strangely. Fancy a bit of Neil? Closing out the programme. Thanks a lot. richieallen.co.uk. Speak to you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. on YouTube. Until then, it's bye from me. Thanks. Bye now.